I'm Boyd Rachels. I'm here with my dad, Bill Rachels, and today I'm going to be interviewing him about his life. So my first question for you today is, did your parents or any other family members participate in World War II?
Both of my parents were relatively young for the World War II generation. My dad, excuse me, my dad volunteered and joined the Navy through an ROTC program he was in. He then they sent him to flight school. He became a pilot. His squadron was checked out in the Corsair airplane, and then the war ended, so he never got called up to go.
But he was able to fly around still, like with the Navy and all
Yes,
that?
he flew. He earned his wings in the Navy. He was carrier qualified, and his squadron was going to be the next group to go because of the upcoming assault on Japan.
All right. So my next question for you, I'm wondering, like, how did you feel when hippies became popular and just the rise of hippies?
Again, my thoughts in high school were very molded by my parents and their friends. So I felt that hippies were a cancer growing in our nation and about to destroy the United States. When I went to college, a very liberal college, a guy that turned out to be one of my best friends then, who was, he was in my dorm, but when I first saw him, he was from New York, and he had very long hair, all the way down past his shoulders. So I knew he was just a damn hippie. Later on, I got to know him. He was the number one player on the tennis team, and we became friends. And so all of a sudden, I had my gyroscope was turned upside down. I wasn't sure where what the right thoughts were. So I went through a period of becoming a hippie myself.
Like you said, the Vietnam War did affect you in ways, and like you said, like you had friends that fought in it, and so did you like get called up or like drafted or anything?
Yes, of course. Like my dad, it was near the end of the war, but I didn't realize it was the end of the war. I won the draft lottery at my college campus. So my draft lottery number was number 5, which meant I'm going for sure once I'm finished with my college deferment as a student. After a long thought, I decided I would join. I really wanted to fly airplanes, so I wanted to join the Tennessee Air National Guard. They didn't have any openings for pilots, so I joined a top secret courier detachment that was at the Guard unit and became a top secret courier, carrying orders around to different places. I guess in hindsight, fortunately, I never had to serve in Vietnam. When I was in basic training, Nixon announced that he's withdrawing from Vietnam. So, I didn't have...
So you just got saved?
Well, yeah, but I also went through all that and didn't really have to. Shortly thereafter, my unit was disbanded.
Okay. So my next question is, it's about the stock market crash of '87. I was just wondering if that affected you in any way.
Oh, absolutely.
And how did that, like, what happened with that with you?
Well, I had a business, a manufacturing business. It had grown to be a fairly medium-sized business, had over 1,500 employees, and 5 or 6 plants around, well, actually 5 and then 6 plants around the country. And it was highly, highly leveraged. I did all the growth and expansion of the business with debt instead of with equity. Because I had studied finance, and finance school kind of teaches you that leverage helps you increase wealth if you're careful. Well, obviously I wasn't careful because I didn't see that crash called Black Monday coming. So it was October of '87, largest ever single day drop in the market, and my business made products for the housing industry. And of course, the housing industry is usually the first industry to go in a downturn and the last one to come back. So my banks decided to ask me to pay off a $36 million line of credit. And of course, I couldn't do that without getting the company refinanced. It was tough to get a company refinanced that's in housing, and also tough to get a company refinanced that's in the middle of a large startup that is costing money instead of making money. So essentially, I was wiped out. I went from what I thought was a very wealthy guy to a very poor guy with a large negative net worth as a result of that period.
So what did you do to get yourself out of that?
Well, it took a while to think about it, sort of get a focus in life again, figure out what I wanted to do, what would I do next. It was it's hard to build a business of that scale when you don't have two dimes to rub together. So I decided to take my grandfather's advice and do what I love doing, and the money will come. So I loved sailing, and I went to 2 trade shows, boat shows, and quickly found out you can't make a living with sailboats. So second love was flying airplanes, and I've been a flight instructor, and from early on I've been flying for quite a while, and I decided that I'll go become an airline pilot, and I had no idea that that was an extremely competitive world, but I persevered. I got focused, laser focused, which is really the only way you can accomplish something. You got to get really a good focus first, and then I just went at it. I went after every rating I'd never had, flying rating, and went to various interviews for airline jobs, and I eventually got very lucky and got hired at Southwest Airlines, which then was a very small regional airlines that no one had heard of.
And then so since you said like you were a pilot and all that, you were obviously affected by 9/11. So like, what was it like for you experiencing or like witnessing 9/11, and like how did that affect your life?
It was surreal.
Where were you when it happened?
I was in Long Island, New York, in
So you were,
Islip,
like,
New York, on an overnight.
So you were over there, like
Yes, we could see the smoke from Islip. It's
Wow.
about 20 miles to the city center from there, 20 or 25. We obviously the airlines had shut down completely. Nothing was flying, and so I got our crew together and other crews, and we decided we would go and give blood. We all went down to the blood bank, and they didn't want us because they were already full. That essentially the catastrophe of 9/11 really meant you're either dead or you happen to be alive. It wasn't where a lot of people had lost a lot of blood and needed blood. So as the days went on, it was several days where we went back to flying again, and even after we started flying, it was very surreal.
What was the first time flying like after?
Well,
Your
my first flight was to be from Islip to Fort Lauderdale, and just about over or offshore from Atlantic City. Flight attendants were screaming that somebody is being very disruptive. Of course, then the federal rules were that pilots can't leave the flight deck. So I was stuck there. I really couldn't go evaluate if it's a real threat or not. The flight attendants were, they say, unable to do anything about it. So just about south of Atlantic City, I announced that I'm diverting to Baltimore, which means I turned the nose of the airplane pretty much right at Washington, D.C., and began an emergency descent. Shortly thereafter, I'm joined up with F-16s, and essentially they wound up escorting me to the Baltimore airport, and we were able to get this guy kicked off the plane, and we were several hours later we were released again. It took hours because the entire bureaucracy, it seems, of the United States had to review all the facts and all of the write-ups and all of the reports of all the eyewitnesses before they would say we're okay to leave. So it's funny, but later in life, several years later, on a overnight, as I'm about to retire, sitting at a long table with several flight crews together eating dinner, I was telling the story, and the young pilot across the table from me said, "I was in the F-16 on your left side." So
that's really cool.
And he said it was just as chaotic on the military side as it was on the civilian side. No one really knew for sure what to do. So that was interesting.
Yeah. So how did the Vietnam War, how did it affect your life, like, during the war?
I think I lost a lot of faith and trust in my government and politicians in general.
For what reason?
I began to question the ways I was raised and brought up. As an example, how could I hate hippies when I really didn't know a single one of them at the time that I did? Just to see all of the massive sea changes that our country went through, our society went through, how the divisions deepened. It was a very tumultuous time. It's not a positive time at all. I I think what really hurt me the most is watching guys who had fought in Vietnam coming home and how everyone was spitting on them and calling them baby killers. They had zero respect for anyone in the military, or even anyone that had served in the military. If you had a military haircut, you could forget it.
Is that all?
That's plenty.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. Well, thank you for sitting with me today and letting me interview. I learned a lot more about you. And I hope my viewers did as well about life. Thanks, Dad.
All right, man. Way to go.
Thank you.